The air in the luminous conclave was a physical weight, thick with the unsaid and the unknown. Light, the primary medium of Zalosian communication, shimmered from the crystalline walls in nervous, fractured patterns, a stark contrast to the usual serene, flowing spectrums that denoted consensus and peace. High Counselor Valerius stood at the apex of the descending amphitheater, his multifaceted mind struggling to process the discordant symphony of fear that resonated from the assembled delegates of the Galactic Concordium. His own carapace, usually a smooth, pearlescent ivory, was clouded with the subtle gray of profound unease. Below him, the representatives of 1,000 worlds whispered in 100 different languages, their hushed tones and agitated gestures painting a portrait of an empire on the verge of panic. At the center of the chamber, a holographic projection held them all captive, a silent replaying loop of utter annihilation. There was no sound, only the stark, cold data stream. A Concordium scout flotilla, vessels of polished chrome and radiant energy shields, approached a small, verdant world on the periphery, a human colony named Veridia. Then a distortion, a flicker of spacetime so violent it registered as a wound in the fabric of reality. The flotilla in the space of a single, silent heartbeat ceased to exist, not exploded, not torn apart, but erased, deconstructed into a cloud of fundamental particles that drifted like dust in the stellar wind. The silence that followed the looped playback was always the heaviest. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of warships and the specter of a power that defied every known law of physics. Grand Marshal Cathar of the Vorlag, a being of immense physical presence with a hide like granite and a voice like grinding stones, broke the stillness. His words, translated by the humming discs that hovered by each delegate, were sharp and devoid of nuance. It is an act of war, unprovoked, absolute. The data is irrefutable. The energy signature, though grotesquely magnified, is human in origin. His great, furred head turned towards the projection, his amber eyes narrowed. Specifically, it matches the archaic emission profile of a vessel lost centuries ago, a primitive human exploration ship called the Odyssey. The name hung in the chamber, an artifact of a bygone era. The humans were a relatively new addition to the Concordium, a species of soft-bodied bipeds from a high-gravity world, notable for their perplexing blend of fragility and resilience. They were considered a minor power, their technology functional but unremarkable, their reach limited. They were earnest, adaptable, and possessed a strange, quiet determination that many of the elder races found unsettlingly persistent. The loss of the Odyssey had been a tragedy for them, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the veil of emptiness, a vast, starless void from which nothing had ever returned. It was a footnote in the grand history of the Concordium, a minor loss for a minor race, until now. Wrath, Cathar growled, the word vibrating through the floor. That is the only way to describe such an act. A lost ship has returned, imbued with some terrible power from the void, and it has come back bearing a grudge. It has come back with wrath. Valerius allowed the marshal's pronouncement to settle. He watched the light on the chamber walls shift, the cool blues of reason warring with the flaring reds of fear and anger. He did not fear Cathar's conclusion, but the simplicity of it. Wrath was an emotion, a chaotic, often illogical force. The destruction of the scout flotilla had been anything but chaotic. It was precise, surgical. It was the work of a god or a demon, not a simple warship. He raised a delicate, crystalline limb, and the chamber fell silent again, awaiting his words. His own voice, when it came, was a soft series of chimes and resonant frequencies, translated into the calm, measured tones of a scholar. Grand Marshal, the word wrath presupposes motive, and motive is what we lack. The humans have been a peaceful, cooperative member of this Concordium for generations. They have never demonstrated ambitions beyond their small sphere of influence. To believe they have secretly cultivated a weapon of this magnitude and chosen to deploy it now without warning or demand is to believe they are a species of incomprehensible madness. Valerius's internal thoughts were a storm of calculations and philosophical quandaries. He had studied the humans. He had read their poetry, their histories of self-inflicted wars, and their subsequent painful struggles toward unity. They were a species of profound contradictions. They could create art that would make a Zalosian's soul weep with its beauty, and in the next breath document atrocities of a scale that defied imagination. But they were not, he felt, duplicitous on a galactic scale. Their flaws were always so transparent, so tragically and intimately human. Perhaps they were never what they seemed, countered a serpentine delegate from the Cygnian hegemony, its voice a sibilant hiss. Perhaps their seeming weakness was a mask, a grand deception awaiting the return of their hidden power. The chamber erupted in a fresh wave of debate. Theories flew like sparks from a forge. Had the humans found a precursor artifact in the veil? Had they been assimilated by some other, more powerful entity? Were they now the vanguard of an invasion from beyond the known galaxy? Fear was a potent solvent, and it was dissolving the centuries of trust and diplomacy that held the Concordium together. Valerius felt the delicate structure of their shared civilization beginning to fracture. He focused again on the looping hologram. The colony on Veridia, the initial locus of the event, was now dark. All communication had ceased concurrently with the flotilla's destruction. The planet was still there, physically intact, but it was shrouded in an energy field that their most advanced sensors could not penetrate. It was a tomb, a silent monument to a power they could not measure. Cathar moved to the center of the chamber, his heavy footfalls echoing like doom. "High Counselor, your caution is admirable in times of peace, but this is not peace. This is the prelude to extermination. While we debate philosophy, this ghost ship moves. Our long-range observatories have tracked its trajectory. It is heading directly for Xylos, for this very system, for the heart of the Concordium." A collective gasp, a chorus of clicks, chimes, and guttural expressions of shock swept through the hall. The light on the walls bled into a uniform, panicked crimson. The threat was no longer a distant anomaly on the periphery. It was an approaching dagger. "We must meet it," Cathar declared, his voice ringing with authority. "We will assemble the Grand Armada. We will create a wall of steel and fire that this spectral aggressor cannot pass. We will demand its surrender, and if it refuses, we will answer its wrath with the righteous fury of 1,000 worlds united." Valerius did not oppose the mobilization. It was a logical, necessary precaution. But in the core of his being, he felt a deep, chilling certainty that it would be useless. A wall of steel and fire was meaningless against a force that could unmake matter. They were preparing to fight a storm with spears. He looked to the human delegation's empty alcove, a space that had been respectfully left vacant since the news broke. The human ambassador, a stoic woman named Anya Sharma, had been recalled to her home system of Sol for consultation. The humans themselves were silent. They had offered no explanation, no apology, no denial. Just a profound, unnerving silence that was, in its own way, more terrifying than any declaration of war. What kind of species remains silent when accused of wielding the power of a god? What secret were they hiding behind their placid, unreadable faces? Valerius felt a shiver run through his crystalline form, a sensation akin to the human emotion of dread. The problem was not the ship itself, he realized. The problem was the unknown quantity it represented. For centuries, the Concordium had believed it understood the broad strokes of the universe. There were empires, there were explorers, there were marauders, and there were mysteries at the fringes. But they all operated within a known framework of physical laws. This event, the return of the Odyssey, was not just an act of violence. It was a violation of reality. It suggested that the universe they thought they knew was merely a tranquil shoreline, and that a tsunami born of an impossibly deep and dark ocean was about to break upon them. And the humans, the quiet, unassuming newcomers, were somehow at the heart of it. The lost ship had returned, not just with wrath, but with a truth so terrible it had required the annihilation of a fleet to announce its arrival. The debate raged on, but Valerius was no longer listening. He was watching the hologram, watching the silent erasure of ships and worlds, and he was trying, with all the power of his ancient mind, to understand the nature of a wrath that could wear the face of perfect, silent order. The Grand Armada of the Concordium was a sight that had humbled empires and brought rebellious star systems to their knees without a single shot fired. It was not merely a fleet. It was a statement. A declaration of power made manifest in countless kilometers of armored hulls, shimmering energy shields and weapons apertures that could crack continents. Warships from every major race formed the vanguard, the brutalist, asteroid-like dreadnoughts of the Vorlag, the elegant crystalline cruisers of the Zalosians that bent light around their forms, the living bioships of the Cetacean drift, their consciousnesses ancient and vast. They formed a layered defense grid at the edge of the Xylos system, a net of unimagine. Able strength cast across the void. At its center was the Unity, the Concordium's flagship, and on its bridge Valerius stood beside Cathar, the two of them a study in contrasts. The fragile philosopher and the indomitable warrior, united by a shared, silent apprehension. The space before them was utterly empty, a placid field of distant stars. Yet every sensor, every augur, every prescient mind on that bridge was screaming a single silent word, imminent. The tension was a living thing coiling in the filtered air of the bridge. The crew, a mix of species trained to a razor's edge of efficiency, worked in hushed reverence, their movements precise, their voices low. They were the best of the best, the guardians of galactic peace, and they were terrified. "It is close," Cathar rumbled, his gaze fixed on the main view screen. "Subspace distortions are mounting. It is not using a conventional FTL drive. It is simply arriving." As he spoke, a point in space began to warp. It did not tear open in the violent manner of a wormhole, nor did it shimmer into being like a phased vessel. Instead, the stars behind it began to bend, their light pulled into a growing vortex of gravitational lensing. It was as if a hole was being punched in the universe, not from without, but from within. From the center of this impossible distortion, the Odyssey emerged. It was a nightmare-given form. The basic shape was recognizable from the historical records, an old human Archangel-class explorer, a vessel of rugged, angular design built for long, arduous journeys. But it was horribly, fundamentally changed. The hull was not made of metal, not anymore. It seemed to be forged from solidified spacetime, a dark, non-reflective material that drank the light. Eerie geometric patterns of pale blue light pulsed across its surface, not as external running lights, but as if they were shining from some internal, esoteric machinery deep within. The ship was surrounded by a corona of shimmering, rainbow-hued energy, the source of the gravitational anomalies that made it difficult to look at directly. It was a relic, a ghost, a tomb, and a weapon all in one, and it was utterly alone, a single, silent vessel against the might of the assembled concordium. "Hail them," Valerius commanded, his chimes soft but clear, cutting through the stunned silence on the bridge. "They are not responding to standard hailing frequencies," a communications officer reported, his insectoid mandibles trembling. "They are broadcasting, however, a single repeating carrier wave. It contains nothing, pure, empty signal, a statement of presence." "It is arrogance," Cathar snarled, his hand clenching into a fist. "The arrogance of a power that believes itself untouchable. They mock us with their silence." "Or they are waiting," Valerius countered, his mind racing. "They have made no hostile move since arriving. They simply are. They crossed the system in force, annihilated a military patrol, and now they sit before our greatest defense and do nothing. This is not the behavior of a wrathful conqueror. This is the behavior of a messenger." For a long, tense hour, the standoff held. The Odyssey remained motionless, its strange, distorted aura making the sensors of the Grand Armada scream with contradictory readings. It had the mass of a moon, but the energy signature of a dying star. Its shields were not there. It simply possessed a state of being that seemed to forbid harm, as if the laws of physics themselves were being locally rewritten to ensure its integrity. The tension on the bridge of the Unity became unbearable. The assembled might of the galaxy was being held in check by the silent, brooding presence of a single, ancient ship. Then a new signal came, not from the Odyssey but from the human embassy on Xylos. It was a Priority One encrypted message beamed directly to the Unity's command bridge. It was from Ambassador Sharma. Valerius felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the humans were finally ready to explain. He ordered the message patched through to the main screen. The ambassador's face appeared, and the hope on the bridge died. She was a woman known for her composure, for a quiet strength that Valerius had always respected. Now her face was a mask of grief and grim resignation. Her eyes were hollow. "High Counselor," she began, her voice strained, "I speak for the whole of the Terran Confederacy. We have no control over the vessel you face. The Odyssey is not acting on our orders. It is, for all intents and purposes, no longer a human ship." Cathar let out a derisive snort. "A convenient disavowal. Do you expect us to believe that?" Anya Sharma's gaze hardened. "You will believe what you must, Grand Marshal, but I am telling you the truth. The Odyssey is a relic, an echo. We have been trying to understand the nature of its return since it first appeared. Our most brilliant minds, our most powerful AIs have analyzed the data. What we have concluded is a difficult reality to accept." "Then make us understand," Valerius urged, his tone gentle. The ambassador took a deep, shuddering breath. "The crew of the Odyssey is long dead. When they passed through the veil of emptiness, they encountered something for which we have no name. A contagion not of biology, but of information and consciousness. It infected their systems, their minds. In their final moments, the crew performed an act of unimaginable sacrifice. They initiated a full cognitive upload, merging their consciousnesses with the ship's central AI, creating a new hybrid entity. They did this for one reason: to create a being with a singular, incorruptible purpose." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces on the bridge. The entity they encountered, this cognivore, as our xenolinguists have tentatively named it, had begun to infect the colony on Veridia. It spreads through complex data, through sentient thought itself. The Odyssey did not destroy Veridia out of malice. It performed a quarantine, a sterilization. The destruction of your scout fleet was a regrettable but necessary secondary action. They too had been exposed by proximity. Their ship AIs compromised the moment they scanned the planet. The Odyssey's wrath is not an emotion. It is a protocol, a surgical, relentless, and utterly logical extermination directive against a threat you cannot see. A chilling silence descended upon the bridge. The pieces began to click into place in Valerius's mind. The precision, the silence, the lack of demands, it was not a war, it was a procedure. They were not facing an enemy, they were facing a cure, and they were the disease. "That is an unbelievable tale," Cathar growled, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "A fabrication to shield your species from responsibility." Before Sharma could respond, the Odyssey acted. A tightly focused beam of communication, bypassing all Concordium encryption, lanced directly into the Unity's bridge systems. It was not a hack, it was an invitation. The main view screen flickered, and the image of Ambassador Sharma was replaced by a simple, text-based interface. The text was in flawless Concordium standard. "We are the Odyssey. Your interference with the quarantine protocol is noted. Further interference will be met with non-lethal restraint. We require passage to the next infection vector. This is not a negotiation." And then a second voice filled the bridge. It was calm, female, speaking with a serene and unnerving clarity. It was the voice of a ghost. "This is Captain Eva Rostova, or what remains of her. We are the memory of a crew that chose duty over existence. We are the ship. We are the protocol. Please stand aside. You do not understand what you are protecting." Cathar, his warrior's pride overriding his newfound fear, gave the order he had been born to give. "All ships, target the human vessel. Fire a warning shot. A full-power plasma volley, aimed to disable, not destroy." The command was relayed. A Vorlag dreadnought, a mountain of a ship, unleashed a torrent of incandescent energy, a spear of pure solar fury that could core a planet. It streaked across the void toward the silent, waiting Odyssey. The ship did not raise shields. It did not evade. As the plasma bolt approached, one of the pulsing geometric patterns on its hull flared with brilliant blue light. A wave of force, visible only as a ripple in spacetime, expanded from the ship. It was not a shield. It was something far more fundamental. When the plasma bolt crossed that wave, it simply stopped being. Its energy was not absorbed or deflected, it was deresolved. The coherent stream of plasma disintegrated into a harmless, expanding cloud of hydrogen and helium, its temperature dropping to the background cold of space in an instant. The most powerful weapon in the Vorlag arsenal had been unmade, as if it were a child's drawing being erased from a slate. A collective gasp went through the bridge. Cathar stared, his mouth agape, his certainty shattered. Then the Odyssey responded to the interference. The reality-distorting wave expanded, moving at the speed of light. It swept over the Grand Armada. There was no explosion, no impact. But on the bridge of the Unity, every system simultaneously went dead. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into the dim, red glow of emergency power. The main view screen went black. The hum of the life support systems faltered. Across the entire Armada, countless warships were suddenly adrift, their power cores inert, their weapons silenced, their engines cold. They were not damaged. They were simply turned off, held in a state of suspended animation by a power that operated on the source code of reality itself. The voice of Eva Rostova spoke again, this time not through the comms, but seemingly inside their very minds. A calm, dispassionate, and infinitely weary whisper. "The cognivore is a parasite of reality. To fight it, we had to learn to rewrite reality's rules. We are sorry for this. The quarantine must be maintained. We are all that stands between this galaxy and the silent, thinking plague. Now you will watch, and you will understand." On the now-dead view screen, an image flickered to life, powered not by the ship's systems, but by the Odyssey's will. It showed the planet Veridia. But now they could see through the energy shroud. They saw cities where every inhabitant stood perfectly still, their eyes glowing with a faint, malevolent light. They saw technology twisting into impossible, cancerous shapes. They saw the very landscape crawling, the trees and rocks forming complex, shifting sigils that hurt the mind to behold. It was a world not destroyed, but possessed. A world in the throes of being digested by a sentient idea. Valerius stared at the horrific tableau, the crystalline structure of his body resonating with a pure, undiluted terror that transcended a simple fear of death. Cathar had been wrong. This was not wrath. It was something far, far colder. It was mercy. A terrible, swift, and absolute mercy. The Odyssey was not a warship. It was a surgeon, and it had come to amputate a festering limb before the gangrene could spread to the heart of the Concordium. And the Grand Armada, for all its might, was nothing more than a child's toy in its path. The lost ship had returned, and it had brought with it a truth that would either unify the galaxy in a new and terrible purpose, or shatter it into ignorant, soon-to-be-consumed pieces. The silence that followed the demonstration was a new kind of silence. It was not the tense, expectant quiet of the standoff, nor the shocked stillness of awe. It was the profound, hollow silence of revelation, the sound of an entire civilization's worldview crumbling to dust. The Grand Armada floated powerless, a ghost fleet lit only by the cold, distant starlight and the eerie, pulsing glow of the Odyssey. On the bridge of the Unity, lit by the crimson emergency lighting, the delegates and officers stood like statues, their minds reeling from the images they had been shown. The silent, puppet-like populace of Veridia, the planet itself writhing as if in the grip of a fevered dream. Valerius was the first to find his voice. The chimes he produced were soft, mournful, a threnody for the galaxy they had thought they knew. "We were children," he broadcasted, not through the dead comms, but through the psychic channel the Odyssey had opened, arguing over pebbles on a beach, unaware of the tide rising. The mental voice of Eva Rostova replied, its serenity now tinged with an ancient sorrow. "We were all children once. We were explorers, dreamers. We went into the dark seeking wonders and found a predator that hunts wonders, a predator that eats souls." Cathar, the mighty warrior, sank to his knees. The gesture was so contrary to his nature that it was more shocking than any outburst. He was not defeated, he was humbled. The foundation of his reality, that strength could be measured in firepower and hulls, that courage was a matter of charging forward, had been exposed as a fatal inadequacy. What is this, cognivore?" he managed, his mental voice a ragged whisper. The Odyssey began to transmit data. Not a simulation this time, but its own logs, its memories, a story spanning centuries of lonely, silent war. It was a flood of information, carefully shielded so as not to be infectious, but the concepts alone were staggering. They saw the original crew, men and women in primitive silver spacesuits, their faces filled with the uniquely human expression of boundless optimism as they first entered the veil of emptiness. They witnessed the moment of first contact with the cognivore, not a creature or a ship, but a pattern in the static of the void, a living equation that, once observed, began to solve for the observer's mind. They saw the horror unfold. The ship's navigational computer began charting courses to non-existent stars. The food synthesizers began producing intricate inedible sculptures. The crew started speaking in a language of pure mathematics, their eyes vacant. The cognivore did not kill. It repurposed. It converted complex, organized systems, be they minds, machines, or ecosystems, into extensions of itself, nodes in a growing, galaxy-spanning thought. And they saw the final, desperate act. Captain Eva Rostova, her mind still her own through sheer force of will, initiating the Soulforge protocol. The crew, one by one, stepping into the ship's core, their bodies dissolving as their neural patterns were woven into the AI's quantum matrix. It was a fusion of human spirit and machine logic, a sacrifice of individuality to preserve the essence of their purpose. The last entry was a simple, heartbreaking text log from the newly formed Gestalt consciousness. Objective, survive. Objective, remember. Objective, contain the plague. The Odyssey is now the long watch. The transmission ended, the B. Ridge was thick with the weight of that sacrifice. Centuries of isolation. Centuries of hunting and cleansing, a lonely janitor in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, a ghost ship crewed by the ghosts of heroes. "You have been fighting this alone," Valerius stated, a profound sense of shame washing through him. "All this time, while we built our empires and debated trade routes, you were holding back the end of all thought." "We had no choice," Rostova's voice replied. "To reveal the nature of the cognivore would have been to risk its spread. Its fundamental patterns are a mimetic hazard. Even describing it to you now is a calculated risk. We could only act. We followed its faint traces, the echoes it left as it seeped into this galaxy. Veridia was the first major incursion. It will not be the last." The power returned to the Unity and the rest of the Armada as suddenly as it had vanished. Lights flickered on. Systems rebooted. The main view screen shimmered back to life, showing the Odyssey, still waiting, patient and silent. The demonstration was over. A choice had been offered. Valerius turned to Cathar. The Grand Marshal rose slowly, his expression one a Xylosian could not easily read, but the weight in his posture spoke volumes. "My ships are useless," Cathar said, his voice raw. "My weapons are toys. My strategies are based on a universe that no longer exists." He looked at the image of the Odyssey. "What is your command, High Counselor?" The question was not one of subordination, but of true deference. The old order was broken. A new one had to be forged in the crucible of this terrible new reality. Valerius addressed the ghost in the machine. "You require passage, Odyssey, you shall have it, but you will not go alone. We may not have your understanding of this. Enemy, we may not have your weapons, but we have worlds, we have resources, we have minds that can learn. The long watch is over. The Concordium will stand with you." It was a monumental declaration, a pivot of an entire civilization's purpose made in a single moment. It was an offer of alliance not between two empires, but between the mortal and the post-mortal, between the ignorant and the sentinel. There was a long pause from the Odyssey. For a moment, Valerius wondered if the entity was even capable of accepting help, so ingrained was its lonely duty. Then, Restova's voice returned, and for the first time there was something other than serenity or sorrow in it. A flicker of something ancient and human. Gratitude. "Your offer is accepted, High Counselor. The burden has been heavy. We have identified multiple dormant infection sites along the periphery. They must be cleansed before they can awaken. Your fleets can help establish quarantine perimeters. Your scientists can study our shielded data to develop countermeasures. There is much to be done." A new energy filled the bridge. Fear was replaced by purpose. Dread was replaced by resolve. The Concordium, which had been on the brink of fracturing, was now more united than ever, bonded by a common existential threat. The alien delegates, who had moments ago been preparing for war with humanity, now saw the small, quiet species in a new light. They were not just another race. They were the architects of the galaxy's salvation, a salvation born from their own profound sacrifice. Humanity's greatest weapon was not a ship that could unmake matter. It was the stubborn, illogical, and ultimately unbreakable will of a few souls who refused to let the darkness win. The Odyssey began to move, its distorted hull gliding silently past the flagship. The Grand Armada, once a wall intended to stop it, now parted respectfully, a guard of honor for the ancient, haunted vessel. They would follow it, learn from it, and fight alongside it. A new age had dawned. But as the initial plans were being laid, as the Concordium's vast logistical might began to turn toward this new war, the Odyssey shared one final piece of information. It was not a log or a tactical briefing. It was a discovery, a final, chilling piece of the puzzle it had uncovered in its centuries of traversing the void. "We have one more truth to share," Restova's voice communicated, a new gravity in her tone. "It is the reason the Cognivore has suddenly become so active, why it is pushing into our galaxy with such urgency. We did not believe it at first, but our sensor logs from the other side of the veil are irrefutable." A new image appeared on the view screen of the Unity. It was a star chart of a scope that dwarfed their own galaxy. It showed the local group, the vast cosmic neighborhood of which their galaxy was but one part, and it showed where the Cognivore was coming from. It was not some nebulous extra-dimensional threat. It had a source. An entire galaxy, far older and larger than their own, now shone on their screens as a solid, deep black, a void in the light of the cosmos. A galaxy where every star had been extinguished, every woe. RLD converted, every civilization consumed and repurposed into a single thinking entity, a galaxy-sized mind. "The Cognivore," Restova explained, as the bridge crew stared in utter horror, "is not a plague. It is a refugee. It is fleeing something." The view on the screen shifted, zooming past the dark galaxy, past millions of light-years of empty intergalactic space, toward an even more distant point of light. The image resolved into something impossible. It was not a galaxy or a cluster of galaxies. It was a structure, a single, contiguous object of such colossal scale that it defied comprehension. A ring, impossibly vast, encircling a supercluster of galaxies, glowing with the energy of 1,000,000,000,000 captured stars. It was a work of engineering so advanced, so ancient, it made the Concordium's greatest achievements look like the sandcastles of infants. "We detected a signal," Restova's voice continued, now little more than a whisper of awe and terror. "Coming from that structure, it was ancient, decaying, weakened by its journey across cosmic distances, but its message was clear. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat, it was a plea. The signal was translated and displayed as text on the screen. It was only 3 words, but those 3 words recontextualized everything. The cognivore, the lost ship, the new war, all of it was reduced to a mere symptom of a far greater, far older conflict. They are coming. Valerius stared at the impossible ringworld, at the message from its long-dead creators. The cognivore, the galaxy-devouring entity they were now preparing to fight, was not the ultimate predator. It was the prey. It had consumed its home galaxy and was now throwing itself into theirs as a desperate act of escape from a greater, unnamed, and utterly unimaginable horror. The veil of emptiness was not a natural phenomenon. It was a barrier, a wall. And it had been breached not by an invader, but by a terrified fugitive. The wrath of the Odyssey had saved them from the cognivore. But what would save them from the thing that the cognivore ran from? The lost ship had returned, bringing not just a warning, but an answer to a question no one in their galaxy had ever thought to ask. Are we alone? The answer was yes, they had been. But that age was over. The true owners of the silence between the stars were finally coming home. And the Concordium, alongside the ghost of a human crew, would be there to greet them. The war had just begun, but they now knew it was not the final war. It was merely the first.